Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your stacks of research, all the box office data, the production notes, the crazy timelines, and we boil it all down for you.
We find the essential facts and hopefully some of the more surprising insights buried in there.
And today we are diving deep into, well, one of the most unlikely success stories in modern film history. The Fast and Furious franchise.
It really is a phenomenon. I mean, you're talking about something that started out as a pretty modest street racing movie in 2001 and somehow over 2 decades became this physics-defying, multi-billion-dollar spy saga.
Right, and that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to track those massive shifts, the shifts in identity, in genre, and sheer scale that let this series become Universal's single biggest franchise.
Which is saying something. We're talking about the 8th highest-grossing film series of all time. The combined gross is over $7 billion.
It's just staggering. So we really need to understand how a movie about, tuning Honda Civics and hijacking trucks became a series about launching cars into space.
And the sources you've given us are, well, they're a perfect map of that whole journey. We've got the financial data, the super technical production notes on stunts and CGI, and of course the incredibly convoluted continuity they had to build to keep the idea of family together.
Exactly. So the central question for us today is really a big one for Hollywood IP. How did a series so rooted in, a very specific street culture manage to reinvent itself over and over again?
And not just reinvent, but maintain audience excitement for 20 years. How did characters like Dom Toretto and Brian O'Connor go from being street racers to, basically globe-trotting super agents?
Stopping tanks, securing global super weapons, the works.
It's a textbook case of adaptive IP management. The studio tested things, they pivoted, but they always kept that one emotional anchor.
Family.
The theme of loyalty and chosen family. But to really get how big the success was, we have to start with how close the whole thing came to crashing and burning right at the start.
Okay, let's unpack that. The very fragile beginnings. We start in 2001, The Fast and the Furious.
Directed by Rob Cohen. And let's be honest, it was a pretty clear homage to Point Break, just swapping surfboards for street racing.
And bank robbery for hijacking trucks full of DVD players.
Right. And that film, plus its sequel to Fast and Furious in 2003, they set the formula. It was pure, grounded street racing, all about tuner car culture and that dynamic between Dom, the outlaw, and Brian, the undercover cop who gets drawn in.
The first 2 films did okay. They were solid. They found their niche audience. But then came the third one.
The Fast and the Furious.
Yeah.
Tokyo Drift in 2006. And this is where the franchise hits, well, an existential crisis. The original stars were gone.
That's the first major break. Our sources say Paul Walker had just lost interest. He was talking about politics, studio stuff, that kind of thing.
And Vin Diesel, who was really the heart of it, he declined to come back. He was focused on his other big franchise at the time, The Chronicles of Riddick.
So Universal is left with a sequel that has none of its heroes.
And what's wild is how hard they try to keep Don involved. The screenwriter, Chris Morgan, who becomes essential later, he pitched a whole murder mystery.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Don goes to Tokyo, learns how to drift, and solves a crime. But Universal said no. They wanted a high school theme, a younger cast.
Which is how we got the standalone sequel with Sean Boswell and the Japanese drifting scene.
Exactly. And the reception, it really showed how much they needed those core stars. Tokyo Drift was lukewarm. Critically, I think it's at 38%. On Rotten Tomatoes.
And financially, it was the worst performer by a mile. It only grossed about $159 million worldwide.
That kind of number leaves a franchise in limbo. You can just imagine the executives looking at that and thinking, well, that's it. It's over.
This is where most franchises would just die off or, get sold for parts and go straight to video.
And you can see that lower budget feel in the production. There's a great anecdote about the challenges of actually filming in Tokyo.
One of the most crowded cities in the world.
And one of the most heavily regulated. Getting permits to shut down streets for racing scenes was basically impossible. So the director, Justin Lin, had to go guerrilla style.
He just shot it without permission.
Pretty much. His team actually hired a fall guy.
A fall guy? What does that even mean?
He was one person whose entire job was to step forward and pretend to be the director when the police inevitably showed up.
You're kidding.
Nope. So they're filming in Shibuya Crossing. The cops roll up and this guy says, "It's on me. I'm the director," and they take him away.
And what happened to him?
He spent a night in jail. But it worked. Justin Lin and the crew got the shots they needed to finish the film. It's that kind of outlaw spirit that define the early movies.
That's insane dedication. But here's the real turning point. The thing that saved the franchise wasn't in the movie, it was a business deal.
A brilliant piece of what the industry calls IP arbitrage.
Vin Diesel agreed to do that tiny, uncredited cameo at the very end of Tokyo Drift.
Right, where he pulls up and challenges Sean Boswell. He didn't take a salary for it.
No. Instead, he made a trade. He told Universal he'd do the cameo if they gave him the full intellectual property rights to his Riddick character.
He was using his leverage in this small, kind of failing franchise to get control of his passion project. And for Universal, that one little scene of Dom Toretto back in a car was the hook they needed.
It was the signal to audiences that they could reinvent the series with its original stars. A genius negotiation. It basically traded a middling asset for what would become a multi-billion-dollar juggernaut.
And funnily enough, Tokyo Drift, despite being a flop at the time, has kind of been reevaluated.
Yeah, car enthusiasts love it now, right?
Yeah.
It's a cult classic because it's the one that really dives deep into the technical side of drifting culture.
And, crucially for the long game, it introduced us to Han Lu, played by Sung Kang.
And the backstory on Han is fascinating. He didn't even start in Fast and Furious.
Not at all. He's originally from another Justin Lin film, an indie movie from 2002 called Better Luck Tomorrow.
So by putting Han in Tokyo Drift, they retroactively pulled a completely separate film into the Fast and Furious universe. That's some next-level world building.
It absolutely is. But it created a huge problem for them down the line.
Because Han dies.
Spoilers.
Yes.
Han dies at the end of Tokyo Drift. So when Universal realized they needed him and Dom and Brian all together for the next film to work, they had to figure out a way to press pause on their own timeline.
Which brings us to the moment the series really finds itself. The rebirth.
The great retcon.
We jump to 2009, the fourth film, just called Fast and Furious. This was the big reunion.
You've got Diesel back as Dom, who's now a full-on international fugitive. You have Paul Walker as Brian, who's back with the FBI. Okay. Michelle Rodriguez and Jordana Brewster are back as Letty and Mia.
And this was more than just a nostalgia play. It was a strategic move to rebuild the whole thing on the foundation of those core relationships.
And it paid off, big time. The box office completely validated their confidence. Fast and Furious grossed over $360 million on an $85 million budget.
That was double what most people in the industry were projecting. It actually broke Universal's opening weekend record, a record that had been held by The Lost World, Jurassic Park, since 1997.
The family was back, and they were very, very profitable.
But to make it work, they needed that massive timeline fix, a full-blown retcon.
This is where it gets tricky, but brilliant. To get the fan-favorite character Han back on Dom's crew, the writers decided that this film, Fast and Furious,
and the next two after it.
Right, Fast 5 and Fast and Furious 6 all take place before the events of Tokyo Drift.
It was a huge gamble. You're asking the audience to accept that the fourth, fifth, and sixth movies are all prequels to the third movie.
But it worked. It let them bring the whole crew back together without having to explain how Han was still alive. It turned the worst-performing film into this pivotal mid-series event that everything was now leading up to.
And the plot of that fourth film gave them the emotional weight they needed. The whole thing is driven by Dom trying to avenge Letty's supposed murder.
Right, by the drug lord Arturo Braga. That grief and rage is what brings Dom and Brian back together. It reestablished the emotional stakes.
But the real turning point, the moment the franchise just went supernova, that was 2011. Fast 5.
This is the film. This is where they didn't just follow the formula. They threw it out and created a new one.
So they had a hit with the reunion. But how do you go from a $360 million movie to a true global blockbuster?
You change the game. Universal knew that the street racing angle put a ceiling on their audience. It was too specific, too niche, so they made a very deliberate pivot.
They shifted genres.
Completely. They moved away from street racing and went all in on being a globe-trotting heist film with car chases. Think The Italian Job or Ocean's 11, but with way more muscle cars.
And Fast 5 was that transitional movie. The racing is still there, but it's just, one piece of the puzzle. The real goal is the big score.
Stealing $100 million from a drug lord in Rio de Janeiro.
And to pull off a heist that big, you need a team.
You need an A-team. So they brought back everyone, all the fan favorites from all the previous movies. It was the moment they assembled the crew we now know as the family.
Han is back, Gal Gadot as Giselle, Tyrese Gibson as Roman.
Ludacris as Tej, the tech guy. Leo and Santos. It was this big multicultural all-star crew built on loyalty. And they doubled down on the theme when Mia reveals she's pregnant with Brian's child.
But the single biggest addition, the thing that elevated the whole series, was bringing in Dwayne Johnson.
As DSS agent Luke Hobbs, this was a game changer. It gave Dom a real antagonist, someone who was his physical and ideological equal.
And the story of how Hobbs was created is amazing. It's all because of social media.
Yeah, the part was originally written for a totally different kind of actor, someone older, like a Tommy Lee Jones type.
But then what happened?
Vin Diesel, who's also a producer, was paying attention to his Facebook page, and he saw tons of fans saying they wanted to see him and Dwayne Johnson go head-to-head on screen.
So they just rewrote the part for him.
Right. They completely redesigned the character of Hobbs for Johnson. They turned him into this hunter, the government's best bounty hunter. It was totally fan-driven casting.
And Johnson went all in. He did this insane workout regimen to bulk up so he would look like a genuinely unstoppable force against Dom. That clash of titans gave the movie this huge gravitational pull.
And the spectacle had to match that new star power. The stunt work in this film is just incredible, and so much of it was practical.
Okay, let's talk about the vault heist, the climax, where they literally drag a multi-ton bank vault through the streets of Rio with 2 Dodge Chargers.
That sequence alone took 4 weeks to prepare and film.
And they didn't even film it in Rio, right?
Most of it was in Puerto Rico. Rio was just too complex for that level of destruction.
Yeah.
But the technical side of it is what's really amazing.
To get those shots of the actors inside the cars looking like they're driving while this chaos is happening.
They used a special rig, a top-mount dual-drive system.
So what does that do?
Basically, a stunt driver sits in a cage on the roof of the car and does all the actual driving.
So the actor inside is just focused on their performance.
Exactly. On the fight, the dialogue, selling the stress of the moment. It's how they created that incredible illusion. The final part where the vault smashes all the police cars, they shot that on a U.S. Navy pier.
The result was just undeniable. Fast Five grossed $626 million, and the critics loved it. It got a 78% on Rotten Tomatoes. The genre pivot worked.
And that set the stage for Fast and Furious 6 in 2013, which just escalated everything even further. Now we're in full-on international espionage territory.
Right. Dom's crew is retired and rich, but Hobbs recruits them for full pardons if they help him take down a mercenary named Owen Shaw.
And this is where the writers really started listening to the fans online. The fan demand was so huge that they made the biggest creative leap yet.
They brought Letty back from the dead.
A massive risk.
Yeah.
You're asking the audience to believe she survived, now has amnesia, and is working for the bad guy. But it showed how far they'd go to keep that core family together.
And if you want to see just how far the scale had jumped from that first movie, you just have to look at the tank scene in this one.
Oh, the tank on the highway. It's one of the most absurd, incredible set pieces in the whole series. And again, mostly practical.
What do you mean?
That was a real tank. And during filming, it ran over about 250 real cars on a highway in Spain. This wasn't street racing anymore. This was vehicular warfare.
But the movie still had that emotional core. It has the tragic death of Giselle, who sacrifices herself to save Han.
And that sacrifice immediately becomes the motivation for Han's next move, which is to finally go to Tokyo. And this is where the timeline finally, brilliantly snaps back into place.
The mid-credit scene.
The mid-credit scene of FNF 6 shows us Han's death from Tokyo Drift again. But this time, we see who was driving the other car. It's Deckard Shaw, Owen's older brother, played by Jason Statham.
It's pure genius storytelling. He walks away from the crash, calls Dom, and says that amazing line, "You don't know me, but you're about to."
And in that one moment, Tokyo Drift is no longer the orphan film. It's the central event that everything has been building towards. It's the ultimate cliffhanger.
And the box office just kept climbing. FNF 6 set another record, grossing almost $789 million worldwide. The momentum was just unstoppable.
Which brings us to what many consider the absolute peak of the franchise.
Furious 7 in 2015, this was the culmination of everything. The action, the emotion, the box office.
The plot is simple. Pure revenge. Deckard Shaw is hunting the crew, and Dom has to team up with this new covert ops guy, Mr. Nobody, played by Kurt Russell, to get him.
And what's amazing about this one is the director, James Wan, really committed to an old-school action feel, even with these impossible stunts.
Yeah, the sources say it was 90% practical stunts. They only use CGI for about 10% of the action, and mostly just to erase wires and safety rigs.
And the cost of that commitment is just staggering. They destroyed over 230 cars making Furious 7.
Just think about that. Over 40 of those were wrecked in just one sequence, the mountain highway chase they filmed in Colorado. That's where the budget goes. Not just salaries, but sheer glorious destruction.
But the defining moment, the one everyone remembers from the trailers, was the airdrop.
The airdrop sequence, that's the moment the franchise officially said gravity is optional.
And they actually did it.
They actually did it. The stunt team spent months planning it. They dropped real, modified cars out of a C-130 cargo plane from 12,000 feet over the Arizona desert.
They had GPS-guided parachutes on them, right? So they could land in a specific spot?
Exactly. The logistics were like a military operation, coordinating the planes, the cars, the camera crews.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal feat.
And for the close-ups of the actors inside, freaking out.
That was a giant gimbal rig against a green screen. You could spin them 360 degrees to simulate the fall perfectly. It's that blend of real-world destruction and cutting-edge tech that defines this era of the franchise.
But of course, the biggest thing about Furious 7 wasn't the spectacle. It was the profound challenge they faced during production.
The tragic death of Paul Walker mid-filming.
And this is where the family theme really became real for the cast and crew. Finishing the film and giving his character, Brian O'Connor, a proper send-off was this huge emotional and technical undertaking.
Paul's brothers, Caleb and Cody, came in to be his stand-ins. They provided the physical performance and motion capture.
And then the visual effects house, Weta Digital, had to do the impossible.
They did. They took on over 350 incredibly complex VFX shots. They used CGI to recreate Paul's face. They repurposed unused footage from other films. They used archival footage. Whatever it took to finish his performance respectfully.
And that effort, that love, you can feel it in the final film, and it resonated with audiences everywhere. Furious 7 became the biggest film in the series by far.
It grossed an unbelievable $1.515 billion worldwide.
It was the fastest film ever to hit $1 billion at the time. It did it in just 17 days.
And that wasn't just action fans. It was this global outpouring of affection for Paul Walker. The final scene, that farewell, with the song See You Again, it transcended being just a movie.
It was about family and loss and legacy, and it cemented the franchise's identity forever.
So after a peak like that, Universal did what any smart studio would do. They moved to expand the universe.
It's a way to keep the brand going between the main films and, maybe manage some of the growing egos of the stars.
Which led directly to the first major spin-off, Hobbs Shaw, in 2019.
Focusing on that great rivalry between Dwayne Johnson's Hobbs and Jason Statham's Shaw, they team up against a cybernetically enhanced Idris Elba.
And what this film did really well was expand that idea of family beyond Dom's crew. We got to see Hobbs' Samoan family roots, and we got more of Shaw's family, including his mother, Queenie, played by the great Helen Mirren.
It's a smart strategy. If the theme is family, show us everyone's family. But that expansion didn't happen without some serious drama behind the scenes.
Right. And you have to understand the stakes here. The long-term producer, Neil Moritz, who'd been there since day one, actually filed a lawsuit against Universal.
He was removed as lead producer on Hobbs & Shaw and claimed breach of contract.
And that off-screen fight just shows how immense the pressure is when you're managing a multi-billion-dollar property. They eventually settled it, and he came back for F9, but it shows the cracks were starting to form.
So back to the main saga. We get to the beginning of the end. Fast X in 2023.
Which was designed as the first part of a grand finale. And the choice of villain here is just perfect franchise storytelling.
He's the son of Hernan Reyes, the drug lord from Fast 5.
Exactly. Jason Momoa plays Dante Reyes, and he's out for revenge for his father's death and the loss of his family's fortune. It turns the crew's greatest triumph into the source of their biggest threat.
And Momoa's performance was so different. He described Dante as Dom's foil, playing him as sadistic and androgynous. A real peacock. It was a great choice.
But the production of Fast X really showed the strain of trying to maintain this level of spectacle.
The budget just ballooned. It ended up costing an eye-watering $378.8 million. By far the most expensive film in the series.
And on top of that, the original director, Justin Lin, who had really saved the series, he quit early on.
A major disagreement with Vin Diesel was the report.
It just highlights that tension when your star is also your producer. Lou Leterrier came in to take over, and he tried to bring it back to more practical stunts, like that insane vertical quarter-mile race down a dam.
But the film still had to introduce new family members.
Right. We get Brie Larson as Tess, who's Mr. Nobody's daughter, and Daniela Melchior as Isabel, the sister of Dom's ex-girlfriend Elena. It just keeps expanding.
And, of course, they had to have a massive shocker at the end.
The return of Gal Gadot as Giselle, who somehow survived falling out of a plane in Fast and Furious 6.
The bigger move was in the mid-credits scene, using Dwayne Johnson again.
A very strategic move. Dante targets Hobbs in that scene, which immediately sets up another standalone movie called Hobbs and Rays with Johnson and Momoa. It's designed to be a bridge between Fast X and the next main film.
So that brings us to the big question. What does the end of the road actually look like?
It was supposed to be a two-part finale, Fast X and Fast X Part 2. But then Universal reportedly asked for it to be a trilogy.
But the path to that finale is now full of financial tension. That final film, F11, has been delayed multiple times, from 2025 to 2026, and now Diesel is teasing 2027.
And our sources say the big issue is the budget. The studio's apparently not willing to greenlight the final film if it costs more than $200 million.
That is a massive cut. Fast X cost almost $380 million. How do you even do that?
Well, the reports say they're looking at cutting screen time for some of the big stars, or even removing them completely just to get the cost down.
Which creates this huge conflict. On one hand, you have the studio trying to cap the budget. On the other hand, you have Vin Diesel making these huge promises to the fans.
Like saying the final film will go back to the roots.
And the biggest promise of all, that Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker's character, will return for the finale.
Which seems to require exactly the kind of expensive, complicated VFX that made Furious 7 so special and so costly. So the tension is right there. How do you deliver the biggest, most emotional finale ever while slashing the budget in half?
And through all this, the brand itself just keeps growing. They've built this whole multimedia empire around it.
Absolutely. You've got the animated series Spy Racers on Netflix, which ran for 6 seasons and brought in a whole younger audience. You have all the merchandise Lego, Hot Wheels, streetwear.
And they're doubling down on theme parks. There's the supercharged ride already, and they're building a whole new roller coaster, Hollywood Drift, for 2026.
But not every expansion has worked. It's worth remembering the Fast and Furious Live Tour.
Oh, that was the live arena stunt show, right?
It was, and it was a massive flop. The reviews were terrible. Once the only danger was dying of boredom, and it just fell apart financially.
Yeah.
All the custom cars got auctioned off. It turns out this kind of spectacle really works best on a movie screen.
So when we step back, what does this all really mean?
Well, for you, tracking this whole thing, the Fast and Furious saga is just a masterclass in how to keep a franchise alive. It started as a $38 million film, almost died with Tokyo Drift, and was saved by a clever IP trade for the Riddick character.
And that Tokyo Drift retcon was absolutely essential to keeping the emotional core of the family together. But the real explosion, the thing that made it a global force, was that genre shift with Fast Five into these big, globe-trotting heist movies.
We saw the budget soar, hitting almost $380 million for Fast X, which is what let them deliver that insane physics-defying spectacle. And the only reason any of that worked creatively was because the anchor was always that theme of family. It justified every impossible stunt.
And now, as we look at the end, the sources reveal this incredible tension. The franchise peaked, financially and emotionally, when it went bigger, when it embraced the higher costs, especially the VFX work needed to honor Paul Walker's legacy in Furious 7.
But now the studio wants to slash the budget for the finale to $200 million, while Vin Diesel is teasing the return of Brian O'Connor. That's the conflict that's going to define the end of the series.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought. Can the Fast and Furious saga really go back to its roots, like Diesel promised, and stick to that lower budget?
While still giving the audience the massive, global, visually complex action they've come to expect. And, most importantly, can it do all that while still giving Paul Walker's legacy the send-off it deserves?
That is the ultimate cinematic tightrope walk. And it makes you wonder if, at the end of the day, the franchise needs that $500 million scale to justify its family, or if the connection to that family is finally strong enough to carry the final ride home, no matter what the budget is. Something for you to think about while we wait for that next release date.